let you all know that Kelly is a keynote speaker, an author, an education evangelist, and chief learning officer at Degreed, which is doing some pretty cool stuff. She's also the author of The Expertise Economy, which was released last year and named one of the best business books of 2019. In that book, it talks about the challenges and opportunities of the future of work and some of the trends of the workforce and the new talent landscape, and why she and her co-author and we think skills will be the currency of business. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Palmer. Welcome, Kelly.
Thanks, Erin, so much, and thanks for inviting me here today. I'm thrilled to be here, and since there's no traveling right now, I thought I'd just put an exciting virtual screen in my background, so you can just imagine I'm someplace exotic. As Erin mentioned, I am the Chief Learning Officer at Degreed. I have actually spent my whole career in Silicon Valley at companies like Sun Microsystems and Yahoo. Before joining Degreed, I was the Chief Learning Officer at LinkedIn, and joined Degreed because I'm so excited about what's happening in the industry in terms of the intersection of technology and learning and talent. And there's so many amazing things going on right now. And today, I'm really going to focus in on actionable strategies for upskilling the workforce. Of course, we've been hearing for a couple of years now about the urgent need to upskill the workforce. And I think we've all seen it in the media as well, that a lot of major companies have made major announcements about the amount of money that they're going to invest in upskilling the workforce. I think Amazon might have been the first one to announce a huge amount of money in upskilling and reskilling. I think it was $700 million that they said they would spend over the next few years. And what's interesting about Amazon is that they realize that automation and digitization is going to mean that some of the jobs at Amazon are going away, but they want to make sure that people can stay employable. So they're actually, in some cases, reskilling people for other industries. The latest company to announce a huge reskilling effort was PwC, and they said they were investing over $3 billion in upskilling their workforce. So we've been seeing this in the media quite a bit, and I've been talking about it since the Expertise Economy was released in 2019, talking about just the trends in the workplace. And I'd like to, start a little bit today by saying, upskilling the word is thrown around quite a bit, but what does it actually mean to upskill the workforce? And I think for a lot of companies and learning and talent professionals and employees, upskilling is about, definitely learning new skills. But for companies, it's about investing in employees' continuous learning. For individuals, it's about investing in your own learning, identifying and filling skill gaps, but ultimately keeping people employable, whether that's you personally or whether you're leading a company and trying to keep your employees employed. So I've been looking at the CEO survey quite extensively that PwC does every year. And I think an interesting point is that they've been asking CEOs every year, what keeps you up at night? What are the things that are most on your mind in terms of the success of your company? And in 2018, the availability of key skills was number 5 on CEOs' lists. And in 2019, that actually moved up to number 3. So we're seeing that, this continues to be a huge topic for CEOs and a huge opportunity for learning and talent professionals to say, look, CEOs are paying attention. They want employees to have new skills, and they feel like it's a key to their success of their companies. So why is that? Why do CEOs feel like skills are so important? And the reality is that if your employees at your company don't have the most up-to-date skills, the skills that will help them win, the companies are not able to innovate effectively. They're not able to go after market opportunities, and they're not able to really think about their customers effectively. So as the 2020 PwC CEO report was published, one of the things that they did was drill into the upskilling challenge. And what they found is that only 18% of CEOs are actually feeling like they're making significant progress in upskilling their workforce. But the good news is that those CEOs who have made a significant investment and have started an advanced upskilling strategy are seeing some amazing results. So first of all, one of the things we always strive for, stronger company culture, and many of you run employee engagement surveys every year, and they're seeing that employee engagement is up when people are feeling like they're building skills and learning for the future. They're also seeing increased innovation, and I know I've talked about earlier the fact that most companies that I talk to around the world are going through some sort of digital transformation. And so when upskilling programs are put in place, they're actually seeing that the digital transformations are actually being accelerated at their companies. And then finally, they're actually seeing improved talent, attraction and retention. So people want to know that the company that they're working for is actually investing in their development. So they're actually able to keep their talent and they're able to attract new talent. So those are pretty great metrics that they're looking at. But as kind of a preamble, talking about the trends and how urgent upskilling the workforce is, a lot of us are in this position where we're saying, okay, I get it. I realize that this is really important, but how do I actually start creating an upskilling strategy, especially if my CEO or my leaders are asking me to do that? So we're going to dive into that today. And I think that what's really important is realizing that old work models are not going to work in this new paradigm moving forward, and putting together an upskilling strategy. So I wanted to mention that first, because we have to be in the right mindset about work models. So old work models are those that we're all familiar with, and it's really about the company focused initiatives and not so much about the individual. It's about companies saying, look, we're in command and control. We are telling people what to learn, when to learn, how to learn, what skills to build, and not really giving a lot of autonomy to their employees. The old models were really all about one size fits all. So lots of classroom training that was aimed at for everyone rather than personalized learning. Old company work models also focused a lot on how do we get more efficiency out of our workforce, and focusing on, if you're creating a learning program, how can I make sure that every dollar I'm spending is actually showing some sort of ROI? And I think that there's a different way to look at that, and we're going to talk about that as well. Old work models have been very transactional and routine-based, process-based, and really a lot of unconnected HR functions. I mentioned that I was the chief learning officer at LinkedIn, and although I was responsible for talent and our internal development of our talent, we had about a 700-person talent acquisition team that was recruiting external talent, and we weren't very connected, which I think today in new work models, we're going to see HR functions becoming much more connected, learning and talent acquisition, and so forth. So I think the bottom line is that old work models that are really focused on what the company needs and not so much focused on how to develop the individual are a bit antiquated and frankly pretty uninspiring. So if we look at the future of work and what's coming ahead, really it's our opportunity to reimagine human work. And the reality is that human skills are going to be more important than ever because AI and machine learning and all of what's happening in the future is going to, the non-routine or the routine work and the process-based work is going to be taken over by technology. And so what's left are humans. And so what we should be focusing on is really creating more value for the company. And that requires different skills. So if we have this as a mindset as we're thinking about upskilling the workforce, I think that's really important. So when we think about new work models, I think that we really need to think about how we focus more on the individual, the learner, the employee, people that are actually needing to build skills. So we've been saying for years, you know, we really want employees to own their own personalized development, but we haven't really given them tools and technologies that really focuses on what employees are most interested in and what we're meeting them where they are in terms of their skills and learning. And so I think it's really important that employees understand their own skill gaps and their strengths and where they need to work on things. And I think the other thing that's important to note is that employees can learn and grow inside the company. I think with older models, employees a lot of times felt like they had to leave their company in order to progress in their careers and to learn and grow. But in this new model, employees can learn and grow inside the company and have completely different jobs than they have today, or assignments. And so this idea that you can learn, you can build new skills, and then you can match your skills to new projects, new stretch assignments, and new jobs in the company, depending on the skills that you're building. And this is a way that we can really engage employees to help employees find purpose and have impact and really get motivated and love learning and skill building. So as we think about building an upskilling strategy, this new model that's individually focused is really key. So when we focus on the individuals, there's three components. We want to focus on learning, how that learning ties to skills you're building, and then how skills can lead to new opportunities within your company. So a lot of times when we think about learning and skill building at companies, we just jump right into the learning. What learning do people need to fill perceived skill gaps? And I think that we need to back up a little bit and really start with some basic questions about what people are trying to do in their careers. You know, like if you ask people what they're excited about, you know, like, are you trying to get better at the job that you have right now? Are you trying to get ready for the next step in your career? What are your career goals and dreams? People are very, very motivated. I know I am. I know most people I talk to are. That if you put learning and skill building into in the context of how they're thinking about their career goals and dreams, there's a lot of motivation with that. So first asking that, you know, whether that you're an individual asking yourself or whether you're having that career conversation with the mentor or manager, that's where you can start. The next thing is that once you've kind of identified, you know, okay, this is where I'm at. What critical skills do I need either to get better at my job or to think about my next role? And then kind of focus in on a few critical skills rather than trying to focus on too many things at one time. Next thing is learning to fill gaps. Then once you actually know what skills you want to focus on, then you can actually go out and focus on learning that will actually fill those skill gaps. And then lastly, you know, think about what projects and jobs and stretch assignments can help you grow within your company. So this is an individual model that I really think helps people build transferable skills, helps people be motivated and engaged in work. And, you know, my new favorite book right now is a book called 9 Lies About Work. It's Marcus Buckingham and Ashley Goodall. Ashley's with Cisco, and they actually talk about what success looks like if you're, and it's about 4, you know, simple questions that you ask, you know. So if you ask your employees and they can answer yes to these questions, I think you know you're on the right track. So the first question is about, you know, at work, I clearly understand what's expected of me. People that get recognized for excellent work, that always feels great. in my work, I'm always challenged to grow, and I have a chance to use my strengths every day at work. If it seems overly simplistic, but I think that it can be very powerful if people answer yes to those questions. Now, as we focus more on the individual rather than the company, I don't want you to walk away thinking, oh, that there's no value, it's all about the individual and not about the company, because really there's huge company benefits in focusing on the individual. And really for learning and talent professionals, it's about creating an integrated and dynamic talent and skills strategy, with the key word here being dynamic. Like, we know things are changing all the time, faster than they ever have. And so it's hard to keep up. So imagine you have technology that helps you as skills change and as goals change, that if you have all of this in a platform where you can get data and insight about what people are learning and what skills they're building, and then help them match that to opportunities and projects, that's the beauty of what you can do at the company level. You can measure progress and you can get insights from the data that's going to be really valuable in terms of driving your business strategy. So let's dive into now the 7 steps for upskilling your workforce. I recently published a white paper on this, and it actually has more details on each of these steps. But I'm going to go through the steps briefly, and then hoping that we'll have time for Q&A, so that if you have questions about this, you can actually we can have a discussion about that. So the first step for upskilling your workforce, and realize that you always have to keep your company and business priorities in mind as you're thinking about this, or for individuals, also your career aspirations. So the first step is to identify future skills. And you can do that at the company level, the organizational level, or the individual level. So I always recommend that you don't identify too many. Again, you don't want to have to focus on too many. So for example, Booz Allen Hamilton is a great example at the company level, identifying one skill, and that was data science, that they wanted their employees to focus on, giving them direction in that way if they wanted to go in that direction. At the org level, identifying it for either the sales organization, the engineering organization, so forth. And then at the individual level, think about it for yourself. What are the future skills I might need to be successful? The next step is actually assessing your skills. And that means, this is so critically important to establishing a baseline of where you're starting, so that later on, when we want to see how progress is made, that you actually know where you're at. So for example, if data science were the example that you were given, or data analytics, you might assess yourself and say, oh, I'm a level 2 or 3, and my goal is to get 1 level higher. You assess your skills, and then you know where you start. And then the next step is about actually setting some goals. So when you set upskilling goals, again, you can do that at the company level, at the organizational level, or the individual level, or all 3, depending on where you're coming from. But I mentioned the example earlier where Booz Allen was saying, basically, we want 25% of our workforce to build skills in data science, and that was the company goal. And then I worked with other companies, for example, Unilever, where they've actually had each functional area identify 3 to 5 skills in marketing and engineering, in finance, and so forth, and then have goals per organization. And then I always encourage every individual to have an individual goal that may or may not align with the organization or company goals. So now we're going to move to step 4, and this is the fun part. You actually, now that you know what skills you're going to focus on, now you want to map learning to skills. And for that step, it's really about, especially in this remote working environment, you can do a variety of really innovative things, whether that be a blended learning model where you're giving people curated content pathways, and then you're blending that with some virtual sessions around a particular topic, where you're getting team projects together and actually getting peer-to-peer input and feedback as you're learning skills. There's a variety of ways that you can get learning so that you can build skills, and this is the time that you do that. Okay, step 5 actually maps to the earlier step where you've actually assessed your critical skills. You know where you're at. Now you're going to measure your skill progress. And what's so great is if you have data and analytics and a technology that allows you to see how people are learning or building skills, what you can do is pull that data and actually put together a metrics dashboard on, these are how many people are building this skill at this rate. You can get signals from a variety of resources or of sources. So for example, some of the companies or CLOs that I'm working with are using badges to get signals, or they're using certifications, or they are using edX or Coursera signals, nano degrees, micro degrees. So you can bring all of those signals in to show how somebody's measuring skill progress. With Degreed, we use a self-assessment, and we also have skill review and skill certification. But the beauty of this part is actually bringing all this data together so you can really see how people are progressing on their skills. Okay, so step 6 is about saying, okay, great, I've actually now built some new skills. How do I actually apply those skills to new opportunities? So this is where you might match your skills to stretch assignments, talking to your managers and saying, what kind of assignment might I do where I can apply these new skills I have. You might see if you have an internal career marketplace, you can see new projects that are talking about skills that match to what you've done, and here's projects you can be on. And ultimately, you might be able to match your skills to new roles and opportunities. So this idea of an internal career marketplace is something a lot of companies are doing around the globe now, because they have the data where they can actually do that matching, and they want to be able to keep their talent within their company. So this is a great way to do that. And then lastly, the 7th step around upskilling, a strategy for upskilling your workforce, is you want to then tie all this back to what CEOs care about the most. So if we think about what we talked about at the beginning of this talk, which is, what do CEOs care about? They care about that employees have the skills that they need to be successful in the future. And, what are we seeing as a result of that? So again, some of those metrics might be around stronger engagement, faster innovation, faster digital transformation. Also, you might be measuring or reporting on like the number of people who are growing their careers inside your company. How many people have worked on new projects and applied their skills? How many people have actually gotten completely new opportunities at your company based on the new skills that they built or the skills that they already have? So this is the 7 steps for upskilling your workforce, how you can actually create an upskilling strategy at your company. And as I mentioned before, I just released this white paper that actually goes into more detail on these steps. And we're actually following our sales organization at Degreed and following this strategy for upskilling our sales force. And so you can follow along with our journey as we actually do that. I did want to mention, one of the questions that I get a lot from people are, well, what skills, when we start thinking about identifying skills for the future, what are the most important skills for the future? And this is where having a dynamic strategy really helps, because I've pulled this is not new. People might have seen this before, but the World Economic Forum actually released, skills for the future a while ago. I actually put those in 2 categories. One being power skills, or some people like to call those human skills or soft skills. I don't think soft skills gives it enough weight, but those are those uniquely human skills that I think are going to be most important in the future of work. And they include things like creativity and communication, emotional intelligence, and probably one of the most important skills we can have right now, which is empathy. Now, that's not to say that the technical skills aren't important too. We know that, digital literacy and data analytics, AI and machine learning are all really important too. One of the things that I did want to show you though is that skill demand changes over time. So if you have data about what's happening in your company, in your organization, you can start to get an idea about what skills are most in demand at any given time. So I pulled this degree data around since March 1st, 2020. These were the top skills that we were seeing based on the millions of users that we have that are actually learning and building skills. And it's no surprise, the number one skill, crisis management, given the pandemic and things that are going on, resilience, mental health. So this list might change on a regular basis, but this is what I mean by a dynamic strategy, where you can actually continue to look at what's trending and how things are changing and what skills are emerging. So that's what data and analytics can do for you. So the other question I get so often is around building a learning culture. It's like now that I know I need to upskill, and I know that even maybe how to put together a strategy, but how do I build a learning culture at my company? How can I create a place where people love to learn and want to build skills and want that to be a part of what they do every day? And I often tell the story about Microsoft and Satya Nadella when he first came to Microsoft, really saying, we need to change our culture at Microsoft from one that is a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. And he actually hired Carol Dweck, who's a Stanford University professor who wrote Mindset, and helped her with their journey on creating a learning culture at Microsoft. And I think, it is a journey. They're making some progress, and they have that in mind. But I think what's most powerful about the way Satya Nadella did this was getting up in front of all of his employees and saying, hey, I'm a new CEO, and there's new things that I have to learn all the time. I don't know everything. And so he made himself vulnerable, and it was a way for his executives and his employees to also say, look, it's okay to be learning new things all the time. I don't have to pretend I know it all. So I think that that's a good way to think about building a learning culture. If you are wondering about where you are in your learning culture, in the expertise economy, we actually talk about 4 levels of a learning culture. I'll quickly go through those. But if you have nothing else at your company, more often than not, you have some compliance training, and that's level 1 in terms of a learning culture. The next level, you might also include like tools and processes for learning on the job requirements. So a lot of times that's like sales enablement or onboarding, a lot of necessary training there just to get your job done. As you move up the scale for building a learning culture, you next get to strategic learning. And that's where you actually start putting together strategic learning programs that support, strategic initiatives like building skills and capabilities. As an example, leadership and management development falls in that category as well. But ultimately, I think every company strives to be a company that is a learning culture that has continuous learning, meaning people are learning all the time, every day, because they realize that whatever they learned before is not going to take them through the entirety of their careers, and that they need to be learning all the time, every day, in order to stay competitive in the marketplace. So I urge everyone to think about the role that managers play in how successful you can be in creating a learning culture or developing your employees, because we know that employees don't leave companies, they leave managers. That's the number 1 reason people leave companies. And the second reason is that I mentioned earlier, people don't feel like they have opportunities to learn and grow within their company, and they actually have to leave their companies in order to progress in their careers. So realize, if you do help people learn and grow, and if managers encourage that, it's going to be a huge competitive advantage. And this new employee-employer compact, we're doing this, we did this at LinkedIn, we're doing this at Degreed, and we're basically saying, look, we're investing in you. We want you to know that we care about your career development and you growing in your career. So we're going to invest in you and help you build skills for your career. And sometimes that means that they're building skills that aren't even relevant to their job as they see it today, because they're building new skills for the future. But that's okay. And in return, employees give companies 110% of their ability to help the company be successful. So that's the new employee value proposition in this new world of work. We did some research with Harvard Business Publishing and Degreed a couple of years ago. And one of the things that we realized is that a lot of employees felt like there were obstacles in order to actually learning or getting professional development in their company. So if managers have this mindset that we're going to help you grow your careers, and we're also going to help you in other ways, these are some of the ways they can help. So the number one thing that employees said was holding them back in terms of learning or progressing is that they don't have time or make the time to learn. And I would argue that if it's a priority, if it's important for people, that they will make time to learn. But managers can help. Managers can encourage it and encourage employees to say, yes, take time out of your day away from or in the flow of work to learn every day. The other thing is around giving guidance or direction in learning. And although we don't want a command and control type of environment, like the old work models, employees do want guidance, like what skills are going to be most important for the company moving forward? What skills are going to be most important for my organization or my field going forward? If managers can give guidance on that, be awesome. And then if managers also have career conversations with their employees and know where their employees are going, they can give guidance that way as well. Managers, if they recognize and reward learning and encourage and enable learning, give direction, that can go a long way to helping people feel like they have a direction to go. So the manager's role is really key in an upskilling strategy and in creating an amazing learning culture at your company. So, set clear expectations, have career conversations, give guidance on future skills, enable, encourage, and reward learning. Of course, always praise excellent work. It sounds so simple, but you'd be surprised how often managers don't even say, wow, you're doing a great job, or thank you for the excellent work that you're doing. And then ultimately managers, and sometimes this is a hard thing for managers to do, is actually help employees find new projects to apply skills and maybe even new roles within the company. And so, but that should be a manager's role. And I think it's so key. So ultimately, I would say, this is true at the company level and the individual level. If you're not ready and willing to learn every day, you're not going to stay competitive and you won't be able to keep up with this rapidly changing world. So from an individual perspective, it's imperative that you think about building skills for the future. From a company perspective, it's key that if your company is going to stay successful and competitive, you have to help your employees learn and build skills for the future. So imagine this, if we are redesigning the way we work, imagine your future workforce more skilled, more engaged, and ultimately creating more value rather than more efficiency. And for companies, that means that really you can increase, and going back to the CEO survey, what do CEOs care about the most? They want to grow, they want to innovate, and they want to create more value. So that's what your companies can get by creating an advanced upskilling strategy. So I'm going to open it up for questions now. I do want to mention that you can follow me on Degreed and see what I'm learning and what skills I'm building. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And then I mentioned the upskilling guide before. So if you want to get the more detailed 7 steps for upskilling your workforce, which has more details and talks about how we're upskilling our sales organization at Degreed, you can download that white paper on Degreed. And I also want to put in a plug, if any of you are interested, we're having our Big Lens Light event coming up on September 30th. And I will be, I'm really excited. I'm going to be interviewing Simon Sinek, and he has a new book out called The Infinite Game. And so, and then we also have Clint Marshall, the CEO of Dallas Mavericks, as one of our keynotes as well. So if you're interested in that, I wanted to give you that opportunity. And I'm going to stop sharing, go to video, and open it up for questions.
Fantastic, Kelly, and thank you so much for that powerful and provocative final keynote. You echoed a lot of what we've heard throughout the day and in the AM panel with folks like Chris Peary, our Gen Z representative, Michael Iaffa from Eris, the text-based learning company, Rodney Evans of The Ready, and Janice, your colleague, with her new role and creating new roles. So Janice actually answered the question of, like, what are the roles of the future? What are you seeing? You've talked a lot about skills, but are there jobs that don't exist yet that you are starting to see the skills indicate as weak signals might be roles down the road? And then I'll curate some questions from the chat for you when you're done.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, and I think that it's ever evolving. You know, I always look at companies on this journey, you know, that it seems like, first of all, we're trying to help people get access to all the learning that's available and build their skill profiles. And then it's about, you know, building skills for the future. And then it's about, you know, how do we help people get new opportunities? So oftentimes when they're on this journey, I'd say we see that roles are changing dramatically. And I think back to my role at LinkedIn, where when I first started that learning organization from the ground up, I started creating new roles that had never existed. And now I see that some of them exist. So for example, instead of hiring instructional designers, I created a role called a learning experience designer. I think that's actually, like, a lot of people are using that role now. So I think it's interesting to see how our field has evolved just over the last few years. Now, if we think about what roles will be in the future, of course, there are going to be roles that haven't yet been invented. And I always recommend that people think about, like, we're here to create value and solve problems. Like, what roles do we think are going to be really important? One of them is around you know, learning data analytics. I know that role probably exists for some people, but it's going to be so critical in the world of learning and work moving forward. So imagining how we can tell our story around learning and talent and skills. So I'd say, you know, is that a role? Not sure, but, you know, I think that new roles will evolve all the time, and we'll see that as we see different skills being emerging and being built.
That's awesome. So again, everyone, if you want to put some questions in the chat, you're also welcome to come off mute. I just think we've got a lot of people here, so I'm trying to do a little bit of wrangling, as we like to. Another question for you. Let's go way, way back. You're a seasoned L&D professional. We've got some people that are either new to the profession or maybe even transitioning from education in a typical K-12 or higher ed environment and now trying to get into corporate L&D, whether from job loss or fatigue or just a real growth in L&D jobs, even despite the pandemic. So can you give us sort of, like, what's the advice you have for these new L&D professionals as they're embarking on their careers?
Well, you know, actually it's, you know, I switched my career mid-career. I was in product development and then corporate strategy before I made a complete career shift into the learning and talent space. And one of the advantages you have as a new person to the field is looking at the field with fresh eyes. You're not held down by the baggage of what we've had in the past. So I'd say that can sometimes be an advantage for you, because I think what we're trying to do, you know, one of the reasons I showed the old models of work and the new models of work is that we've been stuck in an old paradigm. I was actually a bit shocked when I first joined the learning field and found that we were doing still so much classroom-based, lecture-based learning, and that that technology is making new things possible. Why are we not doing that? And I see that we're making a lot of progress, in especially now that we're forced to. Like, the pandemic has been awful on so many fronts, but a silver lining has been that it has accelerated what's possible with technology, because people didn't have a choice and they had to move ahead with some of the things. Some of the people I've talked to around the world were saying, we had this in our plan 18 to 24 months out, but we just accelerated it because we had to. So for new people in the field, realize that, innovation and thinking creatively about how to do things differently, that's what this field, it's one of the things that's most fun about this field, because we can create new experiences and new ways of doing things that are better than what we've done in the past. So keep your fresh mind and your fresh outlook on this as you're learning about your field, and realize you have a huge opportunity ahead of you.
Fantastic. So a couple of questions from the chat, including this one. Where do you see project management as a, quote, skill up path?
So I think it's still going to be in high demand, because, and one thing that I think is really interesting about project management as a skill and as a path is that we're going to see new ways that it's being applied given the future of work. So one thing I'm really big on right now is just this idea of really focusing in on transferable skills. Imagine a GPS for your career where you actually see all the skills that you have and how you can apply them in different ways. Project management is one of those areas where you have a lot of transferable skills. You have to be great in, communication and organization, and so many of those skills that are in high demand. And so I think we'll be applying that role differently in the future, but you still get to hang on to those transferable skills that you can continue to use, and maybe even expand into other areas or combine it with other roles. I think that's the other thing that's important, is I don't think we're going to be so structured in our roles. Maybe you do project management part of the time, and then you're doing data analytics and something else another part of your time, or maybe that becomes the new role definition. I think it's all very fluid and dynamic.
Fantastic, thank you. Here's a dense one for you. One of the big concerns that many companies is that many companies lose their most talented resources because they cannot retain them against giants like Amazon, Tesla, the FANGs. As some of these companies lose their training investment because of this situation. What's your take on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, my take on losing the investment is it's pretty short-sighted, because those companies that are most forward-thinking are actually doubling down on their investments now, so that they can be prepared for when things when things turn around. Having said that, think about what your real life experiences about what employees value most about their jobs. I've heard people say that they would rather have learning and development and career opportunities over their compensation. And that's a pretty big thing, right? Because they realize, hey, if I have a company that's willing to invest in me and to help me grow in my career, that's better than a few dollars in my paycheck. The other thing that I see employees really value is autonomy, and not command and control culture, so that managers who and leaders who believe that people are adults and that they can actually figure out how they do their work and how they deliver those results. And so that plus remote working, this flexibility that maybe work will never be the same, and even as people go back to the office, that they have an option of working remotely or in a hybrid workforce. Those things are really valuable to employees. So if you are those are lower cost ways to get employees excited about working for your company. Then the other thing is, if your learning budgets or talent budgets are getting cut, there's a lot of low cost learning that's available out there. So today people can learn almost any topic from any device anywhere in the world at low or no cost. And so take advantage of that as part of your strategy, is to let people know we're not, even if we're not spending tons of money on designing and developing these huge expensive programs, there's still ways for you to learn through those resources, as well as peer-to-peer interactions. So lots of innovation and opportunities there as well.
Awesome. This might be a little bit related, and I love hearing you talk about sort of the cheap and the low and no cost approaches. So we're also seeing, okay, two things. One, Degreed has always been famous for jailbreak the degree, right? That it's beyond the traditional credentials and certifications that we see from higher ed and kind of the traditional job paths. We're also now seeing traditional brick and mortar higher ed institutions face disruption in their own way of doing business. So what is your take on how companies like Degreed might be able to partner with sort of brick and mortar higher ed or educational institutions to truly rapidly upskill our workforces?
Yeah, I think it's another, again, I talk a lot about opportunities. I think it's a huge opportunity because I think just like, I mean, if you think about what I talked about earlier with old models of learning and work, a lot of what we took was from higher, especially in corporate learning, was from higher education models, which was a lot about lecture-based classroom learning, taking tests, and we know it hasn't really been effective, but it is the way that people learn and progress in their careers in the world today. Now we are seeing that model being disrupted in ways we've never seen it disrupted before. We interviewed Clayton Christensen for our book, and he has since passed, unfortunately. But what he's talked about, he did talk about for the last 10 years, was how dramatically online learning or virtual learning was going to disrupt the higher education market, and how half the universities won't even exist moving forward. So again, now we're seeing this acceleration. People thought that was a bit crazy, but now we're seeing that accelerate. And yes, I think that technologies like Degreed can really help with that. And we are in fact partnering with a couple of higher ed institutions to figure out how this could work, because I think companies that are innovating like Degreed can upskill people much more quickly than that. So partnering is a great way to do that.
Here's a question for you. Frank at Starbucks says, my early in-career technologists are not taking advantage of traditional leadership classes offered by HR. How are companies growing leadership, big L and little L leadership influencers?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And so it's interesting that it starts with my early in career technologists. So think about who those people are and what they're used to, right? They're used to technology, and they probably are out getting a variety of learning from a variety of sources, and actually so learning about leadership and management through ways that they're used to working. And if they're not taking advantage of traditional leadership classes, I'm not sure exactly how those look, but a lot of them might be classroom-based and scenario-based, lecture-based. Maybe that it might not be fast enough or appealing to people. I still think that I don't want people to get me wrong. I think that there's a huge opportunity to do group learning, and even in leadership. Like I've been working with a bit with Tim Munden, the CLO of Unilever, and they're doing some amazing leadership learning, but it's of course all virtual now, peer-to-peer learning, combining a variety of things within their leadership classes. So I think, we have to think about how are we helping people learn in leadership? What are those key skills that leaders need? And it's how it's changing. One of the things I've been doing recently is hosting roundtables for CHROs. And one of the things that they're saying is that they've shifted their focus on what the most important skills are that their leaders need now that we've, last 5 months have been surrounding this pandemic. Some of the skills that they think are most important for leaders are around empathy and around communication with their remote workforce and ways of interacting that they've never had to do before. And so given that as an example, how quickly those changed, I think we need to think about how we upskill leaders given the changing dynamics. And one of the things that they were also talking about is how do we resilience and how do we help leaders adapt to how dramatically things have changed. And so they're rethinking their leadership, but it can be a combination of curated content for the knowledge part, then getting people together in peer-to-peer team situations, leaders together to learn those skills. And I think that that's how some of the most forward-thinking companies are thinking about developing their leaders now.
Awesome. So we are going to wrap up in a minute, but if we could just take a step back. What was the last thing that you learned personally? How did you go about learning it? And a question that we asked everybody in our AM panel that I'm going to ask my audience here again. What have you learned from the last hour or so with Kelly, or today in general? And go ahead and pop that in the chat, just some takeaways, some learnings. But Kelly, what did you learn last? Do you remember kind of how you learned it, maybe even what motivated you to learn it? Right. And yeah, just.
Great question. Well, I mentioned at the top of, or at the end of my talk that I'm going to be interviewing Simon Sinek for our Lens Light. And so I went out and got his book, The Infinite Game, and I've been reading that to prepare for that. So I've been learning about infinite and finite games and how that applies in the world of work. Fascinating stuff. Highly recommend the book. The other thing personally that I'm learning is I continue to learn Italian. It's an ongoing journey for me, but one of the things that I'm doing is using blended learning to actually focus on learning. So I have an app on my phone. I have Duolingo as an app on my phone, but I've also hired an online tutor that is live on a video chat so I can practice. Because if you don't, just like anything, if I just learn Italian from my app and I don't practice and I don't get feedback and I don't reflect on what I learned, I won't be very good at speaking Italian. So I'm using a combination, a blended approach to learning my Italian as well. So that's a skill that I continue to do, because one day I want to spend more time in Italy. So I want to be able to be better at how well I speak. So.
Well, thank you so much again for your time here. Again, I welcome everybody to just pop one more, what did you learn? What did you take away from this chat? Just so I can mine that later for data that gives me information I need to talk about skills in the next Learnapalooza that I create, taking a page from Kelly's book. So Kelly, thank you again for your generosity, your ongoing support of us as event creators. And we just really love what Degreed is doing in its space and appreciate how much you echoed what we're learning and hearing from each other and the other industry experts today. So we feel like we're on the right path, even though we're all kind of sensing our way into the next few months. I feel more hopeful than despondent, thanks to people like you.
Absolutely. I think that there's, always a silver lining and a lot of opportunities if we create them. Some things are out of our power and some things are in our power. So we should take advantage of those things that we can do. So thank you so much for inviting me. Erin, it's always great to work with you and the team. And thanks to everybody who spent their Friday, if it's Friday afternoon for you, spent your Friday afternoon in this great session. So thanks again.